As you know, we had an election in December, so we do have some new officers. I will be the president for this next year. Thank you for giving me that privilege, and I'd like to thank you. I'd like to introduce the other people who will be on the board this year too, so you know who to talk to with any concerns or things you think you'd like to see happen. So Al Levin, would you please stand? Al will be the vice president. Stephen Johns is in the back. He will stay as treasurer. David Hausman, right back here, and he's the one that's doing such a great job on the newsletter. And Dave Laubish is new on the board. Dave, where are you? He's right over here. And then Frank will continue on the board. One of the primary functions of the board is to arrange for programming. So some of the upcoming events as far as Wednesday nights are concerned is on February 19th. That will be next month. Nick Cook will be here, and he was originally scheduled for tonight and had a scheduling conflict and had to postpone for a month. So Nick will be with us next month on February 19th, and there will be a workshop the following day on Thursday at Frank's. On March 18th, Al Sturt will be down. He's from Vermont. He's a friend of Russ, and so we can thank Russ for drawing him in for us. And then in April and May, we will have Trent Bosch and Ed Molesky. I think the sequence is going to be Trent Bosch in May and Ed Molesky. So we have four very good people coming. As far as the workshops that are accompanying some of these, there'll be more information in the website and at our subsequent meetings. So in that regard, I really want to thank David Senecal. David has done a tremendous job on the website. I know in the past we've not really been used to going to the website because there wasn't a whole lot there, but he is doing an outstanding job on that now, so please refer to that for upcoming events. You, as you know, can now pay your dues online. There will be a picture gallery that will gradually expand over time. He's just done a wonderful job. And Dennis has been helping him with that, so we appreciate that. Just a reminder, the Florida Symposium is February 7th through 9th. You can still enroll in that. And we also meet every Tuesday night. There's a lot of every Tuesday of the weeks except this week. There are many of you that don't take advantage of that. And I just want to say that next Tuesday night, the presenter will be John Henry. John, where are you? Why don't you stand up for a second? And John Henry is going to be talking about his way of finishing. And if you look at all these ribbons up here tonight, these belong to John. And so I think it'd be well worth your while to come to the meeting next Tuesday. I'd also like to thank Joe Payne. Joe, are you here tonight? Joe is a member of our club, but he's also the president of the Woodturners of Southwest Florida. And Joe has been very instrumental in helping our people get the website up and going. He is using his own server to facilitate some of our activities, so he's been a great help, and I just want to extend thanks to him as well. So we are very pleased that we have so many members within our community who offer their services in so many ways. That's the good news. The bad news is not everybody feels like they need to pay their dues. And our programming very much depends upon the income from dues. So we just want to encourage you to, if you have not yet paid your dues, please do that as soon as possible. You can either do it tonight back at the back table, or like I said, you can do it online. Dan, you have a few announcements.
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A few short things I want to mention. There's been some going back and forth on what nights we're actually offering the 10% off for the turners. We have come to an agreement that we are offering the 10% off as long as you're an active paying member or your dues are paid up. we're going to offer it all the time for y'all. So as long as you're an active member of the Sarasota Woodturners, we are going to give you 10% off as long as you come in and you're buying hardwoods. Also, we are in the process of restocking our turn-in room. We have quite a large order in right now on its way to us. Hopefully within the next week or two it'll be here. There's a lot of exotics. We are going to be putting a clipboard on the table behind everybody here in a little bit. And if everybody gets a chance and has some ideas, we would like to know what you're looking for turn-in. Certain species, sizes, stuff like that, just to get an idea of what everybody is wanting to do. So we know what we cut here, what we should cut more of, and if we do source material or from our other facilities, what we should bring in more of in sizes, species, stuff like that. For those of y'all that, actually the form is on its way back there right now. Thank you, Alexis. For those of y'all that actually do play with epoxy and do slabs and all that stuff outside of turning, I wanted to mention that we have some very large Perota slabs on the way, if any of y'all know what that is. And these slabs are they're 36 inches wide on average, from 8 feet to 19 feet, if anybody's interested. They're quite large. And we have some really, really nice walnut slabs, about the same width, coming in also. And I do believe they are really long slabs too. If anybody's interested, just ask me or Alexis or anybody here at the facility, and we can give you more information on that. And I think that's all I have for the night, so let's get this party started.
You want to say anything about the river table class?
No, not really.
Thank you very much. Russ, I think you had an announcement or two to make. Where's Russ? I hope he's here. He's the demonstrator. One of them. Okay. All right. Well, until Russ gets a chance to come back, we'll have Frank come over and go through the show and tell table here. Is your mic on? Or?
Well, we'll find out in a minute. Tell me if I switch it on or what. Okay, how's that work? All right. Hey, listen, this is probably the best ever, wouldn't you say? We got prize winners. We got, first off, this is Ed Newton. I stopped in to see Ed, and his cancer is progressing. It doesn't look good. These are some of his prize winners from the Florida, and I wanted you to see, I think of this as the ultimate in the bolt from a board. And what you're going to see tonight, there it is, same technique. As you go through here, obviously, here's Russ's piece, a special with the resin. This even has a name, and special. These are from the show. This is Bill Clark. He's been busy working on these things, and they're coming out very well. This piece over there was, of course, Russ's. And if you look at that, it's also a wave bowl. So it's a lidded wave bowl, very unique.
Is this working? Can you see up there, or is it better when the lights were on? Okay. Is there a way we can get this light on and the lights that are on the screen off?
Should be a switch on that post right there.
Let's try this one.
And there's one over there by Russ's. Isn't there a switch?
Okay.
No, okay. He's got it. All right. And as you go through here, this is unique. This is Eric. Eric, he swears that he didn't do this with a scroll saw, and it's still, jury's out on that. And look at this pepper mill. Isn't that marvelous? I can't reach it. Okay. Who did it?
I did.
Oh, all right. Good deal. Any pepper in it? No.
Actually, it's salt right
Oh, the salt. Okay. Color wood's always fun, and of course you got to appreciate Bonnie's in here. The finishing, my goodness, she must have been gotten tutoring from that guy over there from He does this other stuff. Oh, that's the name, yes, indeed. Now,
So these are both Norfolk Island Pine by Bonnie. Everybody know who Bonnie is? Where's Bonnie? Stand up, Bonnie.
yeah. And other things, this looks like, who is this? There he is. Okay, Dave, nice. And this is Alan? No, this is also Dave. Very good. I like the way you picked up just a little bit of the bark inclusion there. Very attractive. And this is the first attempt by Eric using the epoxy. I think it's very nice. I mentioned to him that he could have afforded to buy some better wood inserts. I think he used scraps, but that's all right. And of course, here's another fish from Pat. Pat out of the box Sullivan is at it again. And drink cup. Oh, how'd you ever get that dry? Because this is Bishop wood, right? Yeah.
So
And
you
that-
did use the bead technique on that,
And other
the
things.
dehydrating beads.
And here's Steve Johns. Amazing what you can do with Norfolk pine when you take the knots away. Beautiful. Lots of pieces here to mention. I actually brought some of mine. I'm still working on using up all the rest of the bullhorn acacia that's growing. Nice. Oh boy, look at this. Somebody's going to love that. Somebody's going to love that. Very pretty. And there and here, this is from Massachusetts, arrived and formed, and I'm glad to hear that he's doing this. Mr. Dooley, he's here somewhere. There he is. Very, very interesting. What's the wood? Well, all right. Not to, oh, what did I miss here? Uh-oh, somebody's been doing some fractal burning.
Are they still alive to be here?
Yeah. We don't want to talk about that too much because.
Salvaged that out of a throwaway barrel
Oh,
and then cut the pieces up and segmented them into that.
oh,
A
there
nice
you go. All kinds of fun, huh? Oh, here we go. Poplar. Wow. What a nice burn. Feathers. Great. Anything else here that I missed? I must have missed something. This one, well, we don't want to talk about that. No, I don't even dare lift it up to show everybody. You're going to have to stand back and admire it from here. Obviously.
So
the,
that's done from the bowls from a board technique. So what we're going to learn tonight,
Yep.
that's the method that John used to make that.
Same thing. And after you do it, you get him to show you how to finish it. That ought to work, right? Okay.
Next Tuesday night.
Next Tuesday night. Okay. I think enjoy it. As I said, this is probably the best ever. So I think this is wonderful. Okay.
Well, thanks to everybody who brought pieces in tonight. The whole function of this club is both to inspire and provide education to allow all of us to advance in our turning, and this is one of the ways in which that's accomplished. Russ, we skipped over you a few minutes ago. I think you had an announcement to make. Russ, you had an announcement to make?
Yeah, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I'm on the board of the Florida Symposium. Many of you have attended in the past. Some of you are planning to go up this year, I know. Every year we have a raffle, and I have 19 tickets left, and I'll just read off what you get a chance on winning if you buy a ticket. They have a Laguna 12x16 lathe with stand, a Vicmark chuck, a Rycon grinder with 2 CBN wheels, a complete Wolverine Varigrind system, Micromotor Master Carver, a package of gouges, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gouges, an airbrush system, a hollowing system, a Fordham variable speed carver, and a complete King Arthur carving kit. So these are not token prizes, they're very nice ones. So the suggested donation is $10 for a ticket. They're only going to sell 1,000 of them, so the odds of winning are pretty good. See me after the meeting if you would like to purchase one. Thanks.
Thank you, Russ. Well, I want to thank Russ and Frank and Jim Titze, who moved in tonight. As I said before, Nick Cook had a scheduling conflict, and so they very kindly moved in tonight to do this demonstration for us. Tomorrow there will be a workshop at Frank's. I think there are 9 people right now signed up for that. There is room for a few more if some more people would like to sign, but we would like to know you're coming. So if you could please let Russ know before the evening is over that you plan to be there tomorrow. Start at 9 o'clock at Frank's. We're not quite sure how long it's going to run. There will be lunch, and it'll extend into the afternoon as necessary. You have a mic?
Yeah, I'm going to, for now, I don't need a pin on one, but I will when I just push the button. Yep. Okay, thanks, Jim. Thanks, Frank, for a great show and tell. That was incredible. That's the nicest selection we've had in a long time. Maybe it took a new president to shake things up a little bit. So as Jim mentioned, our subject tonight is bowl from a board. We've talked about this quite a bit in various demos, and just in general, people have brought pieces in. The concept is not new. If you've done any looking online, you know that it's been around for a while. I just went online today and typed in a regular Google search window, bowl from a board, and here's what I found on the first page. An article from October 6, 2016 in the Woodturner magazine, something from Malcolm Tibbetts on the art of segmented wood turning, Dale Nish creative wood turning. The Wood Database had a complete article by Eric Meyer, Detroit area woodturners, in 2014, woodturnersresource.com, and a Canadian website that I couldn't identify. It just had initials. Maybe it's David's Club, GHWG. Okay, thank you. Anyway, they had a tremendous 33-page tutorial on how to make a bowl from a board. These are just the first 6 out of I don't know how many thousand hits I got. So there's a lot out there. But the concept is that you take a flat piece of wood, like this is what you're going to be using in class tomorrow, and you turn this, what is kind of a 2-dimensional piece, into a 3-dimensional bowl. And it just could not be simpler. And what we'll do tonight is we're going to show you 3 different techniques. Frank will show you his. You know his dizzy bowls. He's getting quite well known. He's devised a way to make those cuts in a very efficient manner and with very little waste, which is the whole idea with a bowl from a board. And then Jim Titze will show you how to make the cuts on a bandsaw. Unfortunately, the bandsaw is not functional, so he's got pieces. He can walk you through it, and we'll be doing it tomorrow, where we will have a functioning bandsaw, not to worry. And then the last part will be, I will show you how to do it on a lathe using a parting tool. So there are many approaches to achieve the same end. Going back to, I think, sometime in the late 80s, a turner named Mike Schuler, who was very well known, particularly in the West, did a presentation at the AAW symposium, and everybody was just wowed. It was kind of an aha moment for everyone that something so simple had not been thought of before that. He credited actually Dale Nish for putting it in a book that was gathering dust on somebody's shelf, and so he didn't even take full credit for it. He gave it to Dale Nish, which was very, very fair of him. But anyway, the concept has been with us for quite a long time, and a lot of people have used it. It was used in this one. I did this, and all I did was take out one ring and insert a ring of epoxy to replace one of the ones that I took out. I guess, Frank, you already talked about Ed Newton's two pieces that he loaned us. But anyway, his spectacular examples of the same simple concept of taking a board, making angle cuts, and turning it into a bowl. And his had crescents on them. That's what this one will be when I finish it. Again, very simple. You laminate a piece of contrasting wood on the back of your blank, and as you cut it, those what is just rectangular, when you look at it now, becomes a crescent when you turn the piece. So this really isn't any rocket science at all. These are simple geometric concepts, and you can have a lot of flexibility as to what you can do with it. So we'll show you the three techniques. Frank's using his jig. Then Jim will show you the bandsaw technique, and we'll finish up with me doing it on the lathe. So we will get started. I'll turn it over to Frank. Before I do that, anybody have any questions? A word about the workshop tomorrow. I think we're now up to 12, and we could take a couple more because it doesn't involve a lot of lathe time. You're going to be doing bench work, bandsaw work, gluing, clamping, so we can kind of rotate and get by with as many as 3 people assigned to one lathe. So looking forward to that. Give me your name afterwards if you would like to participate. As I said, I think we're up to 12 now, so a couple more would be fine. All right, anything else? Frank?
Back in, can you hear me again? Ah, I love it when this works. Before I start, I want to mention that on Tuesday, whoever borrowed the Fortuner bit set, I wish you'd return it because I got somebody who wants to buy it. So it went missing Tuesday. So what we're doing here is we're cutting rings. Now, of course, this is just a simple walnut piece that I glued together of scraps. My intent is not to show you how to make the beautiful bowls, just to show you how to cut it. And this is partially mine, but really the concept here came out of Edward G. Robinson in, where's he live? Toronto area, who wrote a very definitive article about this 15 years ago, I guess, and it still today is very current. So he used something similar. This is a one-way drill wizard, which is nothing more than just a gadget to enable you to move it. Now, what's important here is that this enables me to go straight in and come straight back out. Whenever you're trying to cut these rings with others, in the past we made guides to hold a parting tool, and we've done all sorts of things. Mostly have been forgotten because most of them didn't work real good, but we tried. So, okay, I'll show you how we cut some rings. And the lathe, fortunately, has an outboard side, so we can quickly do that. Now, the cutters. This is the first one, and this was made out of high-speed steel. However, the high-speed steel came out of China, and you really don't ask how high the steel was. So it worked, although it ended up requiring resharpening every cut. Finally, then went to Doug Thompson and got his 1/8 parting tool and threw away the front part and grind it down. So you can see here's one, and the other one I have in here. I've been working with variations on this theme, going back Michael Mode told me that his cutter had a round nose on it and then narrowed down. I can understand that. So what he's trying to do is reduce the friction in the cut after you make the cut. On these cutters, I've taken the time to lap the sides, so I'm cutting sides well. So with that, let's see how this works. I'll get this out of here. What? Yeah, I mean, this is nothing more than a piece of MDF. So I bolted the piece to it. And you really, because here I don't have a tailstock, I don't need to do this. If I was doing it inboard, you can simply bring up the tailstock to the center and hold the center. And holding the center, you can cut. But it's a little easier to bolt it down. And of course, I use the exact same technique in making the vortex bowls or dizzy bowls, merely stacking up the 4 layers. And we did check out. The lathe didn't work when I first checked, but with the magic of plugging it in, it works. So I can stand back here and I would have figured that out. And if you don't mind, I'm gonna skip the mask because the microphone is easier to hear this way. Okay, so here we go. And as this thing goes in, you can just keep on pushing and pay attention to the shavings. So if you notice, there's ribbons coming off. Now, a lot of these things, there are other ways to do it. Of course, one of the ways to do it is the cutters where you go in from both sides. And the problem there, that works fine in the 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, but to use that on something this thick is not as well. It's a lot more, takes a lot more time. So you can see here, I'm watching to see that these shavings come off. I know that at a certain point this is going to pop out. I would normally have the tailstock up to catch it. And I think that's about ready. Now you notice I'm not rushing this because I'm trying to maintain the best possible cut. And I broke through at the tail end. Let's try and finish it. You can see as I break through at the tail end there, it catches, which hasn't been happening before, but I'm slightly off. By the way, you set the angle here using the protractor, and I happen to have this set for 45 degrees. What happened then with the catch we had, it moved ever so slightly, so let me reset that. Now, if you cut this at 45 degrees, you're going to be able to get the maximum height out of it. Of course, you want to be able to change the angle, and there's a protractor built into this, so that usually takes care of it. Okay. having a little problem here. A big problem. Oh, okay, I see. I reset this cutter before coming up here, and it's just a little short. Let me just quick change that. Obviously, these prototypes, you know, are a little harder to manipulate. But I'm getting too much heat building up, so I may have to switch into the other knife. Let's see if we can't get this to finish. Now, obviously, there's a mark on the knife to show you where it pops out, and I should have gone past it. Now, that catch I had meant that this mechanism is stuck. Wait till I reset that. Obviously, the tool we're using is not intended for this at all, but it seems to work. Okay, now I'll tighten that up again. So, the quality of this cut was fine, but I was getting some tear out on the side there. So let's go on and I'll cut one more. I think you get the idea. And of course I have this set so I can merely slide this along to the next cut. And now, if you look at the length that we need is quite long. So even though it's actually an inch and we're just shy, well, an inch and 3/8, a little, maybe an inch and 7/16. So this board is a little thicker than what we usually work with. Let's try one more. Okay, I think the quality of the cut here is more like I'm expecting. So I probably have, on the first cut there, I was a little bit off on my angle. If you take a look at this later, you'll notice that the knife, by grinding it on an 8-inch grinder, I've actually radiused the side. And if you think about it, this is a round circle. I need a radius. So that gives you the idea, and I can continue to cut. Now, if you notice, those pieces will then stack. Now, any questions? Yes?
You don't have that gizmo, how do you do it?
Huh?
You don't have that gizmo that you've got there, how do you do it?
How do I do it?
How's another way of doing it without,
Oh, you can do it with a parting tool. All you need is a parting tool, but you're going to have some means of guiding it. So if you look at the quality of the cut that's here, and it's very important, if you're going to make something other than a straight-sided bowl, you're going to want to vary that angle slightly. So you can come out and then curve in if you want, which requires very minute changes of angle, 1 degree. Very hard to do by eye. So you need something to be able to precisely make these cuts. All right, and that's really the hard part and why we've gone to all this trouble. Now, on obviously, when you're cutting the vortex bowls or dizzy bowls, it's much easier because you're only dealing with a quarter-inch, 3/8 inch thick material. And obviously, the farther I get out on this thing, you know, if this has a little bit of flex to it, eventually you're going to cause a problem. But that's gives us a nice precise cut. Now, just to see if it's not a fluke, we'll try one more. Just one more. Now, a very, very precise angle. You take a hammer and you beat on this until it comes out to where you want it. I told you it was precise. A little bit. Okay. There, that'll do it. So now I lock this again. We're still locked, no change. And I believe it. I haven't changed it. Good point. Yeah, but I've only moved this back and forth. So if you look at this, oh my goodness, you are right. Okay. The hair, okay. I move this. I got to loosen this now and reset this angle. Right there. So we lock that again. Now I got to move it in. Okay, here we go. Lock, lock, okay. So keep your eye on the shavings. The shavings tell you the quality of the cut. Now, I'm using the hammer handle because normally I would have the tailstock come up so that it's inside here so when it comes off, because these can be quite delicate. When they hit the ground, they frequently break. So once again, the quality of the cut is what we're after, and there it is. Okay, Russ, I think that's enough of that.
Jim's going to show you the next technique using the bandsaw. Our bandsaw didn't make it tonight. Here, you were all. I'm turning it over to Jim. You'll get the mic from Frank, and he'll show you how to do it on the bandsaw.
I don't know. No. You can hear me now, huh? I probably don't need it. Well, I'm going to quickly go through how you make a bowl out of a board if you don't have much equipment. I've got a lathe and I have a bandsaw. And what I end up making isn't quite as fancy as these segmented bowls, but it's a step to get there. And you can add some basic rings. The key to making a bowl out of a board if you can't plane it, if you can't drum sand it, if you don't have a jointer, one way is just go buy 12 inches of a 1x6 that has a good edge on it, and you can make a bowl. So step number 2 is basically putting your concentric rings, which defines the size of the bowl. I'm going to use, can I mark on your drawing? You're probably all pretty well familiar with the basis of what we're going to do, but the bowls that I'm going to be showing you, basically, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to start and have a 2-inch base. That's sort of the starting point. And then whatever the thickness of the board is, and I must say, a little thicker board is easier to work with because your rings are bigger. But let's just say for ease of talking about it, you have a 1-inch thick board. I have a desire to have a 2-inch base. I have a 1-inch radius. So I would come out the 1 inch plus the thickness of the board, which is 1 inch. So I would come out 2 inches to create the first circle, and that's going to be the first cut. And then every ring beyond that is another inch, or whatever the thickness of the board is. If you have a 3/4 inch thick board, you'd come out 1 inch and 3/4, and then add 3/4 of an inch. So after you make that first cut, this first ring right here will set right on top. And your bowl is built from that. Any questions on that basic start? So I start out with 2 boards. I've got a good edge. I can glue those together because I'm going to bandsaw these rings individually at a 45-degree angle. So when you do that, luckily we don't have a bandsaw, so you don't have to watch me do that. So I bandsawed this first piece out. This is 3/4 inch thick wood, so all of the rings that I'm cutting out on the bandsaw are 3/4 of an inch because we're at a 45-degree angle. Now, you can go on YouTube. There are tons of ways of changing the angles, but we'll stick with 45. It's by far the easiest. So after you get all of your rings cut out, you don't have this nice process. Here you have to glue them back together. And I just clean up the edges a little bit. I'm real careful so I don't ding up these edges because they're virgin edges and I want to maintain them that way. So I put down a piece of wax paper, put a little glue on each one by hand, push them together. And there's a real important safety issue you really need to pay attention to at this point. Once you put the glue on there, you have to make sure you've gone to the bathroom prior to, because you got to hold this a while. You can't go taking off right away, and that can be dangerous. So anyway, you hold it for maybe 5 minutes, and it sets up well enough you can just set it off to the side, go to the next one. Obviously, this is the first 2 pieces you glue together, and the next step would be to turn a glue block that you can put on your chuck that you can glue the first piece to. And I've glued it on already, and I've glued on 2 more rings here. I just use regular wood glue. You said you have some fast-acting glue, or no? You were talking about a slow-dry glue. I just use a regular wood glue. Hold it for 4 or 5 minutes, and it seems to set up just fine. I will mention when you get to the larger rings, you got to be careful. That, some people you can clamp, you can put rubber bands on them, but you want to be really careful as you get to the large rings. If you do any clamping, you can distort the ring. So you just really want to be careful as you hold them together because they can be distorted pretty easily. So the next step is I've got the, I'm not used to all of this on the end here. So now I have a glue block with a tenon, and I glue the first piece on. I generally do it on the lathe. I have a center point mark because I've drawn all the radiuses. So I usually just use this tailstock. I run it up. That centers the piece on my glue block, and I glue it on. And I handle a little bit of a dimple in there because when you finish the bowl, you're going to round out the bottom. So I usually put a little piece of wood in there so about half of my point sticks out. Let that dry. So while that's drying, and after you have glued your rings together, we have to come back and surface this bottom surface here and get them good and flat. Take me just a moment here. I made up my own, this is nice. I made up my own sanding disc, so it allows me to, you gonna take that off? You need something real small and delicate like this. Actually, it was for another purpose, and I repurposed it. This is really handy here. How we doing here? Good. Okay. Thanks. Now I had made this for a large platter, a jam chuck, and I just went ahead and I got another piece of MDF and screwed it on, used some spray-on adhesive, put some 150 grit sandpaper on it. So when these are glued together, they look like these. So I've got it glued together, and I need to clean up these surfaces. So I generally, I do have a piece of sandpaper on a board here, so that's a real good way to do it. You don't push hard, you just work them around. If you've got a spot that's bad and you need to take a little more off, you always have the option of using a sander like this. But you got to really be careful because you could do more damage than good if you get onto the surface and it gets away from you. You want to get on the center, real light pressure, and just work it around a little bit. So either method works. So I sand the smaller diameter on all of the rings. So I've got the smaller diameter nice and flat. And I haven't touched the other surface for a reason. Because then, we'll take this off. It didn't last long, did it? So, when we're gluing the rings on, I'll put this back on. You can glue the rings on the lathe, or I like to do it this way because I like to perhaps index, and you can see your joints, you can stagger your joints. If you're making a bowl that may have some figure in it, like this one I'm roughing out, this is nothing more than a piece of pine and masonite that I glued onto the board prior to cutting the rings. So there you might want to be able to see what you're doing when you put that next ring on. Now once you do that, there's a good chance you've, in my shop, things don't always work properly and they're not always square and even and all of that. So what I do is take the run out off that last piece that I put on there, meaning you don't want any run out. Especially if you put some rings or something and you have a little run out, you get out to the end and you're trying to finish the bowl, your eye can pick up if it's not perfectly aligned when you've turned that. And I've got an example of that. I can show you what it's like when it doesn't quite work. But so this is another spot where you can get in trouble trying to do something good. And that is, I'm going to do a little shear scrape to take any run out. I want that flat. But in doing that, you can end up putting or not having a straight surface. So I'll show you what I do after that. So this you want to be really light on. You're just taking off any run out, any areas that are high or low, because you want to build it up nice and square all the way. And you can take a pencil or you can feel the run out if there's quite a bit of run out. I was, wasn't I? That didn't sound right, didn't feel right. Yeah. Somebody was working on this end, wasn't he? Sabotage. I thought about that when I was setting over there. I said, don't let that happen. Oh, this is going to work a lot better. I can already see it. This is nice. Oh, yeah. That happens a lot at home, too, I guess. Anyway, we've got that run out taken out of it. So we just need one more table up here, I think. I got too much stuff. So this is a very expensive item here that I'm going to show you next. It's a flat board with sandpaper, and I put a little tail on it, and I'll show you why I did that, because I want to come up and face this off. Another option is I can take that big disc, I can put it on the tailstock with an adapter and have a big sanding disc come up, and it would be nice and square, but that's a lot of work. So I came up with this. If you just hold the board this way and try to get on a surface, you've probably tried it to do that, and it'll just take you all over. You lose control, and you're in real trouble. So I put that little foot on there, so I can come up. I can just get that squared up flat, and if I hold it in the center, if you hold it on an edge, it takes off on you. Just hold it on the center there, real easy, and then you just start. And the part I like about this board is you can rock it back and forth, and you use a little bit more sandpaper than just one piece. And it doesn't take much, and it gives you now a nice flat surface, and you can glue the next ring on and just repeat that process. And you have a little better chance of having a nice bowl at the end. And the one I was talking about, I did this with just poplar, and I had a 1/4-inch piece of oak that I glued to the board before I cut the rings. And I did not square this one up, and I got some run out. So if you want to take a look at this one a little later, you can see that run out occurring, because I didn't clean up that edge. So the other thing that when you make the foot, what I did is I just took part of the glue block and left it glued onto the bottom of the bowl and made a foot out of it. So if you're thinking ahead and you have different contrasting materials, make your glue block out of something that could be used as a foot. If you decide not to, just take it off. But and then if you accidentally get a hole in the bottom, then you put a design feature in like that. So, yeah, this one's ready to be done also. Any questions? It's a pretty simple process. This was made out of cherry and maple. I did this one quite a number of years ago. This one, I did index the rings as I glued them together. So there's a lot of things you can do even with a simple laminated board. And then you can go up the food chain, if you do have a plane or if you do have a table saw, and you get into the beautiful segmented type bowls. But this is the beginning. No questions? Okay. Thank you.
All right, see if I can make this work too. You're probably wondering what this device is here. Jim talked about clamping. Because I do a lot of them, I made this jig. This is a shop fox. It's called a press clamp. You can get them in all different sizes. And so when I glue my sections together, I'll just take the bowl and imagine that I've only got 2 rings on so far, and just line them up and then press down on it and leave it for a half an hour. This is handy if you are doing a lot of them. You can also, and we'll talk about this more in the workshop tomorrow, other ways to clamp are by using big Jorgensen clamps like this. I have them going all the way from 6-inch up to 20-inch, depending on the size of the ring. Jim mentioned that you need to be careful to, on the bigger rings, you want to be careful that they don't distort, but you can use weights. You can use, put on 2 sticks with clamps, rubber bands. There are a lot of ways to do it to be sure you're holding them straight. So when the glue sets, you don't have a piece that's askew in one way or another that you'd have to break the glue joint and start over again. So again, we'll cover all that tomorrow. So the last way, and in a way it's the simplest way, is to use a parting tool. And what I'm going to do tonight, hopefully, this is a piece of sycamore that I got in Pennsylvania years ago, and I've been waiting for a use for it. And so what I'm going to do is make 4 parting tool cuts on this, or maybe 5. I'll talk about that in a second, and stack them up. And this is going to be, I'm remodeling a bathroom, so this will be with 10 coats of epoxy. This will be my bathroom sink. So. And the concept is extremely simple. You just simply make plunge cuts. No, I'm all set. So here I've drawn, this is my blank, and I'm just going to make cuts. I've drawn them all at pretty much 45 degrees. Frank talked about this with his jig and how when it's set up properly, you just repeat the same angle. I'm actually going to change that angle because instead of having a straight side, I want to end up with a piece that has a little bit more curve to it and go down to a fairly small base. So each cut I make, I'm going to actually, what would it be, decreasing the angle a little bit. So my last cut will be the least angle, and it'll probably be like 35 degrees. The important thing when you're doing a technique like this, you make your first cut, and then your second cut must be exactly perpendicular. In other words, this is the beginning of the second cut, and Frank cuts his from the center out. I go from the outside in. You must start this cut exactly at the end of this cut. So when you put the pieces together, they're gonna line up. You also have to take into consideration the kerf, and you're gonna lose some material in the kerf. And Frank talked about that also, and how that very thin high-speed steel blade is ideal for making small cuts, but for doing a piece like this, you need something a little beefier. When I was using this technique on smaller bowls, you want as narrow a tool as possible, because when you get into tighter radiuses, the tool's going to start to bind and burn. But you really have to have strength, because when you're pushing that in, I bought a whole bunch of these smaller. They were 1/2 inch by 1/16 inch, and I said, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to just not waste any wood at all. Well, I didn't waste wood, but I wasted tools because they all broke. They come with a tang that is way too weak to handle the stress, because when you get this tool extended out over the tool rest by 1.5 inches, even a tiny bit of force out there is just going to snap the tool. So I continued using them, but what I did was, as soon as I'd get them from, I think I got them from Packard, they're made by Taylor, I would break the tang purposely and drill out the handle, push the tool in further, and fill it with epoxy. So I reinforced it right from the get-go, because I didn't want the thing breaking in the middle of a cut. But for something like this, and ideally the thinner the better, this is probably my nicest parting tool. It's the one I use for a lot of things, but it's too wide this way. And as soon as, when you're doing a big circle, it's not an issue. When you get down to a circle this size, the tool is going to bind up, and it's going to burn and probably not give you a very satisfactory cut. So a compromise is this one here, where it's a little narrower this way, but I still have a fairly small dimension this way. So this is the one I'm going to use tonight, and we'll see how it goes. The thing that I'm leery about with this is it's spalted sycamore. I think you mentioned that. It's just bordering on being a little punky. So I don't know how it's going to cut. So this is an experiment. What size lathe is this? I'm going to have to, yes. I must have known. Yes. And another thing that's important, Frank talked about it also, it's not so much of an issue with a bandsaw because you're getting a little bit cleaner cut, but when your tool is breaking through, you're going to get tear out. And you want to minimize that, because what you have to do after you've cut these rings is go over, and I have a drum sander. Jim showed you ways to do that without a drum sander. But the rougher that cut is, the more you're going to have to sand away in order to get a good glue joint. So what I do is I turn the, we have the right direction, thank you. What I do is I turn my grinder on, leave it on, and I touch the tool up after every cut. So I'm going in and I'm approaching that with the sharpest tool I can. Another thing I thought about for a while and tried to modify my tool, I thought if I grind it at an angle, it would be this way, I'm going to have a sharper point going through making the initial plunge through the material. So hopefully it'll be a smoother exit from the material, and I won't have so much tear out. It was just the opposite. It made it worse. So what I do is I keep this 90 degrees to this surface here. I don't try to get fancy with any change in angle, but as I said, I will sharpen it after every cut through. So I've sharpened it at home. Are we all plugged in here with a grinder? And do we have a tool rest? Okay. While they're looking for that, Jim talked about it. This is something I made years ago, which is just a piece of sandpaper that goes on a big disc grinder, and this is handy for all kinds of things, but it kind of replaces a drum sander if you don't have one. He showed you another technique over here, but there are many times when you just simply want to have a flat surface with an abrasive that you can put on your bench and rub all kinds of things. So this is handy even if you're not going to make a bowl from a board. Make one up and just keep it around. You'd be surprised how many times you want to get a surface running really true. And the other thing that you can do, which is a little bit of a variation on what Jim told you, is just get some old belts. I have plenty of them lying around from changing them on my drum sander. Glue it to a piece of MDF, and then you can hold this up on your piece while it's turning on the lathe, and that will give you a smooth surface also. So there are many different ways to do it. And again, we'll be covering all of this in the class tomorrow. We're up to 12, but we can handle a couple more. So anybody that's interested, talk to me afterwards. Okay, we all set to go here? Need a tool rest? Yeah, longer one would be good. Thanks. I'm going to turn it around, and since I always stand on this side, so I'm going to continue to stand on this side. Thanks, Tom. Yeah. Okay, I will lock it. You got to. Hmm? Oh, I'd rather be standing, even though I have my back to you, because this is the way I do it normally on my lathe when I'm inboard. So I'm gonna not change that. Where's the little T-wrench? Here it is. That is not the right one. Yep, got it. Any questions up to this point? We got a tool rest for here. All right, I think we're ready to go. I didn't talk about dimensions. I didn't bring a tape, but a vessel sink typically is 6 inches. I think I'm going to have mine a little smaller because I want to make these cuts, these rings. Yeah. Thanks, Pat. I've got 1 1/4 inches of material, allowing for a little bit of loss. When I sand these, if I have 5 rings, which is the way I've drawn it here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think that's going to give me sufficient height. I do want to make them fairly wide. The wider they are, the more contour you can put into the piece. I'm going to put some in because of the angle I'm choosing, the angle of cut, but just to be on the safe side, I think I'll just do 5 layers. And something to remember is that you want your tool to come out outside of your waste block here. I could have made that a little bit smaller, so if I come in, I can turn this away. If you don't, you can't get the last ring off because you can remove the faceplate, obviously, but you want your tool to end right about here. Your last cut should be right here next to your waste block. That reminded me of something. Well, for a vessel sink, I'm shooting for a base of about 3.5 inches. I need to have enough room to put the drain down in. As you know, a vessel sink doesn't have any other, a commercial one has an overflow, and it's designed into the sink. With this one, I can't do that really. So you wouldn't put this in a client's house, because if they turned the faucet on and went away and left it, you'd get a phone call. And most faucets sets that you buy for vessel sinks are a certain height. So just keep those things in mind if you want to try it. All this is a great big salad bowl that you've put 10 coats of epoxy on and use it in the bathroom. And go online sometime, and there's some beautiful ones out there. All right, I think I'm ready to go. Okay, first determination is how wide I want that rim, and I haven't drawn it, but I think what I want for a detail is to come up like this and have my sink kind of look like that when I'm done. So that means I've got to start my cut in far enough. I haven't really drawn this. Pretend that this wood goes out a little further. So I think I want a good 3/4 to 1 inch of material here. So that's where I'll start my cut. And I'm going to eyeball it It's not the most accurate way, and I did make a very fancy cutting jig years ago when I first started doing these with all the different angles on it, and I showed it to some friends, and they said, "Oh, that is so cool, you got to get that patented." I never used it again, because you really can do it with your eye after you've practiced a couple times. You don't need a cutting jig, and as I said, I'm going to make each cut a few degrees smaller or lesser degrees than the previous one. So hopefully by the time I'm finishing my fourth cut, I'm going to come out right by the waste block, and when I stack them up, which I'll do over there, hopefully I'll have a shape that is pretty much the shape that I'm looking for with just some fine tuning. If you're going to put any detail in, Jim picked up a bowl where he'd put some horizontal pieces in between the layers. You have to allow for that when you make your cuts. I said initially you want to start the second cut where the first one ends. If you're going to put anything else in there, you've got to allow for that extra space. So what would that mean? You would start your cut a little bit further in, no, a little bit further back, because you're going to be adding material. All right. In terms of speed, about that fast. I'm not sure how to read this. We're on the smaller pulley, obviously. I don't know, that's under 1,000. I'm not sure what we got here. But you don't need a lot of speed. And you do want your tool rest a little closer to your workpiece.
What angle are you shooting for?
Well, I'm going to start off at about 45, but then the next one's probably going to be 42. And then when I'm making my last one, I'm going to be down to maybe 35. But the important thing is that I begin the second cut at where the first one ends. Again, remembering that you're losing this much plus a little more. The kerf isn't, even if this is whatever, 130 thousandths, I'm losing a little more material than that. So you have to allow for that. So I'm starting the second one 130 thousandths in back of where the first one stopped, plus a little bit of wiggle room. So I'll explain it as I go. But I am going to have the tool rest a little closer. I don't know, can the camera pick up this? Can you see the tool? We're on the wrong side here. Well, you can tell it's not cutting cleanly because the spalted wood is almost funky. You'll notice, you can tell by the sound when I'm just about to break through, because it's gonna sound different. It'll be slightly higher pitch, because there's not much mass there to absorb the vibrations. When I get to that point that I can hear it, I'm going to push the tool a little faster, so the breakthrough is hopefully a little bit cleaner. Because if you kind of linger too long, it's going to tear it a little bit more. And this I've just learned from having a lot of them come out a little bit ragged. So, and then also I'm going to be trying to catch the piece as it falls off the back. It won't really hurt anything because it can only fall as far as the tailstock. I mean the shaft here. bad cut, and it didn't tear out too badly. I think there's hope for this piece. Okay, so my next one, and what I usually do is I just stand up. We elevated this lathe, so I have to stand a little higher. And I'll start my cut just in back of this point here. Yeah, you can see right here. We're on a time lag. This is a little weird. Anyway, I'm going to start the cut just in back of where the tool broke through. In other words, right about there. And as I said, I sharpen it after each cut. I can feel the heat in the tool, and you could tell that it was laboring the tool a little bit, and that's really because of this dimension here and the radius of the piece. So when we get into the last cut, it's going to be really grunting a little, and I hope I can do it. I may have to go to my skinny parting tool, and hopefully it'll work. So on to the next one. Okay, now that I've got my starting point, I'm eyeballing down my previous cut, and then just visually I'm adding a few or subtracting a few degrees from it. I think the reason it's a little grabby is because the tip of my tool is a little below center. Let me try to elevate it slightly. You do want to be very careful of this edge. You can see it's like a meat slicer, and I have a few scars to prove how sharp that is. This floor is very slippery with shavings on it. Okay, once again, I'm going to look for that point where my tool exited the piece in the back. Come back 130 thousandths. I'm adding about 3 or 4 degrees to the cut, or subtracting it. Now I'm feeling the tool binding because I'm working with a smaller radius. Almost the only thing you can do to complete the cut, and I will try the last one with a smaller tool, is you'd have to go back and just remove a little more material on one side or the other just by starting my cut over and just shaving it a little bit. And that way I'm widening the kerf, giving myself a little more breathing room for the tool. Okay, for the last cut, I'm looking for this point right here where the tool exited, back the width of the kerf. Now, I already can see that the way I've made these cuts, this cut is going to end in the middle of my waste block, which, so what I'm going to do to remedy that is before I finish this cut, matter of fact, I'll do it right now, I'm going to turn the tool rest around and remove some of this waste block so it's just simply gone. And I hope then that my tool will exit right by the faceplate. If it doesn't, all I have to do is take the faceplate off, and then I can pull the pieces apart. So it's not a disaster if it happens. But see if I can get my aim perfect here. And what I'll do is I'll remove these pieces so they're just not flopping around. Yeah. I have tried, and it just doesn't have the strength. Yeah, because if you look, you're protruding over your tool rest, first of all, this amount here between the tool rest and the surface, and because you're making these cuts on the oblique, not only do you have the 1¼ inch, you have an additional amount. So by the time you're down at the end, you're a good 2 inches from the end, and so you really need the heft in the tool. And I have tried different ways, and I've broken a lot of tools because it didn't have the strength. How are we doing for time? I think we're okay, aren't we? What? We do, somewhere. You don't want to watch me skate? Yeah. It might be down in that corner of that room down there. Somebody down there want to look and see if there's a broom in the corner? It would be a lot safer. Ah, thank you. Thank you very much. You just didn't want to catch me as I was. Okay, so all I'm doing with this by changing the position is just removing material from my waste block, which I should have used a smaller block to begin with, but this is no big deal at all. Oops. That's true. All right, sharpen my tool once more. Okay, if I plan this right, my tool is going to come out right at the edge of my waste block. And because now I've removed a lot of this that was blocking my vision, I don't really need to look at the tip of the tool anymore once I get it started. I'll concentrate on the angle of the tool compared to this angle, and then sort of eyeball where I think that's going to come out, and I will adjust the tool accordingly. You can see it smoking, and that's because the radius is the smallest that I'm going to have to deal with, so I'm just widening the kerf a little to reduce that friction. Perfect. It was a little jagged, but my cut ended up right where I wanted it, right here by the waste block. So now what I usually do while I have it still on the lathe, and I'll do it, is just take a gouge and remove some material. Whoops. I'm not going to do it. Well, I can do it with a piece out here. No, I can't. Okay, what I was going to do was just remove a little bit of material here so I can flatten this surface. Yeah, I'm not sure what it was hitting on. I think it was probably hitting here, and I was just touching the... Okay, we're good. So I don't think you can see this cut, but all I'm doing is making a little bit of a concave surface there, doing exactly what Jim did, is just making a little bit of a shear scrape here to clean that up. And then I would go, well, I didn't actually make this, but if I had a sanding stick like this, I would hold the sanding stick on it. That would smooth that right up, and then it would be all ready to glue. So let's see how it came out. I'm pleased that this wood is not quite as punky as I thought it looked like it was, so I think it's going to work. You can get away with a lot with coats of epoxy. And we all know where to buy our epoxy, too. Now, when making a dizzy bowl or something where you want put a little more bling into it, Jim was talking about it, you can rotate each layer a little bit and just add to the design. Usually when I'm doing it out of solid material, I try to actually line the grain up. So I'm going to have to kind of study it and see whether that's possible. It may not be, in which case I won't worry about it. But one thing you do want to avoid is having grain at 90 degrees to the layer underneath, if at the most maybe 10 or 15 degrees. We won't worry about that tonight. I guess I can turn my grinder off. It is still very slippery. So that will be my vessel sink. Now, to sand it and prep it for gluing, what I do is, because I have the luxury of a nice drum sander, I just take my pieces, and it's the bottom that you need to smooth. I flip it over and I run it through the sander as a nest like this. So all the pieces are getting sanded at the same time. By doing this also, you reduce the likelihood of getting any sander snipe, which is like a planer. You can have a little divot as you enter it. The bigger it is, the less likely you are to have that happen. So I'm fairly happy with this. I have a feeling this actually will go into service. And I will just glue it using regular Titebond 3, which is the most waterproof. And then I will probably put on 6, sand it really well, make sure I did see a few wormholes, but they're not too bad. Take care of any of that, and then what's that? Yeah, that's true. I never thought of that. I'll leave them. The size is about right. When I shape it, I'm going to put a little contour in it. I probably don't want to go down more than below a ½ inch in wall thickness. That'd be more than enough, maybe even just a touch more, but that should work fine. So you can see how easy it is. Take a single thickness piece of material, which is basically 2 dimensions, and turn it into a 3-dimensional piece. Couple of books. I've mentioned these before. This is one of the best books out there that covers all kinds of turning. Particularly, he's got a whole chapter on bowl from a board. It's focused more on segmented, but the same principles apply. And then also, I've mentioned this, Malcolm Tibbetts is really kind of the grandfather of segmented turning now, with some of his predecessors have passed on. He really is the national leader, and this is an excellent book if you're interested in doing any segmented work. You're welcome to borrow this if you want. So that's what I have to offer. Any questions on what I've done or what Jim did or what Frank did? Oh yeah, because this is, you get 2 parts end grain and 2 parts side grain, so sure. Oh, you mean starting off with the blank? That's a good question. You mean with a great big tree? You'd have to try it. Report back next week, right? I don't know why you couldn't. Obviously, making those plunge cuts with a parting tool and end grain is going to be dicier, but have your tool good and sharp, and it's worth a try. Yeah, I don't know why not. You certainly would. You would get a piece that if you can succeed in making the cuts, you're going to have a piece that's really stable, and you don't have to worry about everything will glue together beautifully. Worth a try. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Yeah. Did I what? Yeah. Yeah, I didn't bring a bevel square, but I would recommend, if you want to do this, do a scale drawing on a piece of paper, and the bigger the scale, the better, but make sure it is to scale. And then put in what you think you want for the thicknesses, and then actually lay your T-bevel square on here, and then transfer that to your tool rest, and that will give you the angle that you want to approach it. But as I said, each one of these I varied by about 2 degrees, so by the time I got to my 4th cut, I was probably down at 37, 38 degrees to get the shape I wanted. You did it all by eye? Yeah. Yes. Well, there are many terms. Bowl from a board is the most common one, but some people call it an economy bowl. because you're really minimizing the waste. There's another term called stack ring, which I brought some of those in. Well, that piece that I had over on the show and tell table was a stack ring, and Frank's Dizzy Bowls are stack rings, where the rings are just smaller. The only difference is the layers are thinner, and you put many more on. This only has 5. Some of them have 25 or 30 when they're only a quarter inch thick. But there are many different names. But if you, not the way I did it. This is segmented. This is what we're going to do in the workshop tomorrow. But the segmenting is really in the preparing the blank ahead of time. It isn't in the. Yeah. Out of the blank, yeah. This blank. Well, it's only segmenting is in that you're. Yeah. Segmenting, well, again, it's a question of semantics a little bit. Segmenting is making any bowl that isn't from a solid piece of wood. So even this is segmenting in a way, but it's all the same wood.
But John, later on this spring, I think we will be having some sessions on the kind of segmenting that you're referring to. There's some different techniques with that, and we'll get into that.
Oh, yeah, we'll do yeah, we've had
Yeah.
requests for segmenting workshops, and we certainly will be doing them, so.
So thank you very much,
Okay.
Russ, Jim, Frank. If I can ask you to keep your seats for just a few minutes, I think we have 2 raffles to call. Tom?